Hello, welcome. I'm Shervington Hannes, and it's time for another episode in our series, The Forgiveness Show. And as promised, this episode, I'm going to be looking at disorders of responsibility. And not my idol, I try not to idolize another human being. There was a time when I did in my personal relationships. And for those of you who are following me with the recovery show with regards to addictions, eventually I'm going to explore that when your drug is another person. But my drug used to be people. Huh. Worst kind of addiction there could be your addiction to other people's attention, affection, all that kind of stuff. Boy, did I have to work on forgiveness of self, releasing it to be unstuck from that. I would want to say that I'm over that. I'm in sobriety for that, and I'm doing very well. I would hope and think much better along the way. But that took a lot of self-forgiveness, a lot of looking at myself differently, looking at situations of what I had, lots of anger and resentment and all of that with regards to what a person did to me or should have done for me and all of that. But today, we're actually going to be exploring neurosis or neurotics and character disorder. Now, there's schools of thought that put forward that we either are constantly blaming ourselves for everything that is going on in our world, or blaming everyone and everything else and the world for everything that is going on in our world. So the first one, blaming ourselves for everything, taking all the responsibility, is to be a neurotic or to have neurosis. And character disorder or disorder of responsibility in which you blame everything, the world, for everything that is going on in your world, is a different style of how we relate to the world. So you can see the two of those, depending on which one you're more likely to be operating from. And there is the theory that all of us have some amount of where we're taking all the responsibility for everything that's happening to us, and then where we're projecting onto others and blaming them for everything that is happening to us. So we have a bit of both. But some people have a default way of how they respond to the world. So you can see right away, for forgiveness to take place, for you to be having a willingness to look at the situation differently, will require of you to, one, take some amount of responsibility for the situation to be able to accept it as it is. So in exploring today, I will actually be using M. Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled, and I really do encourage you to, if you haven't read it, get a copy of it. It can do so much for you in your unfolding. Especially, I encourage parents to read this with kids that you might be having challenges with. It teaches you so much about how to be a better parent, how to work with another human being, how to forgive yourself for all the things that you think you haven't done or you didn't do or you did do that caused your children. Even parents with grown-up children, because they might be adults, but they're still your children. And sometimes the letting go of those children to just be and live their life and trial, error, make mistake, having to forgive themselves, forgive others, and to just experience life on their own terms. But the road less traveled. This is what I'll be exploring. And there are two stories that I want to read for you that speaks to character disorder so well. And you would want to think that the person who have neurosis or the neurotic will have a harder time forgiving or being able to look at the situation differently, but you actually might just be wrong. That person, if they take just the right amount with balance, responsibility for a situation and themselves for the role they played or didn't play in the situation, is more likely to move beyond that and forgive and get unstuck. is the person with a character disorder that is likely to hold on, blaming everything and everyone else for everything that's happening in their world, that's likely to stay stuck and have issues of unforgiveness and not being willing to forgive. So let's dive right in. So, disorder of responsibility are opposite styles of relating to the world and its problems. The neurotic assumes too much responsibility. The person with a character disorder doesn't take enough responsibility. When neurotics are in conflict with the world, they automatically assume that they're at fault. When those with a character disorder are in conflict with the world, they automatically assume that the world is at fault. The speech pattern of neurotics and those with character disorders are different. Now, this is key. You can know a person if they're being a neurotic or a person with a character disorder based on how they speak. In terms of the speech of the neurotic is notable for such expressions as I ought to, I should, I shouldn't, indicating the individual's self-image as an inferior man or woman, always falling short of the mark, always making the wrong choices. And that's a neurotic. But the opportunity for them to be able to shift their consciousness and look at the situation differently is much greater. And there's usually would be, because they take responsibility for the situation, they're likely to be more forgiving. Now, the speech pattern of a person with a character disorder, however, relies heavily on I can't, I couldn't, I have to, I had to, demonstrating a self-image of a person who has no power of choice, whose behavior is completely controlled by forces totally outside his or her control. Now, this is put forward in The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. Few of us can escape being neurotics or character disordered to some degree, to a lesser extent, which is why necessarily everyone can benefit from psychotherapy. That is what Scotty said in his book, The Road Less Traveled. If neurosis and character disorder, he or she is seriously willing to participate in the process of taking psychotherapy, counseling, or just therapy. Now, Scotty went on to put forward that to be able to solve life's problem, because he says in The Road Less Traveled that getting unstuck or dealing with life's problems, and the willingness to work to bring about change or to forgive is about being willing to deal with problems. And Scotty put forward in the book as well that life is like a series of problems to be solved. And the only way to solve life's problem is to solve them. The only way to forgive is to accept the situation first as it is, and then being willing to look at it, shift our consciousness, shift the way we are processing the situation, and then we're going to have a different experience. Now, one of the things that I like to put forward is that we process the world cognitively and mentally, but we experience the world emotionally, behaviorally, and physically. So the way we're thinking have a direct impact on the way we're likely to feel about what we're thinking. And based on how we're feeling, that is being promoted by our thinking, will determine our actions and reactions or our behaviors. So remember, life is about, one, how we are processing it cognitively, mentally, how we then have emotions or feelings based on what we're thinking, what are our beliefs about what we're thinking, and that is how we're experiencing the world emotionally, physically, which then has its end results or the consequence in terms of our behaviors, actions, and reactions. I'd like to also say that life is about a series of consequences that then have choices that promotes it. But life is always about change. So we can safely say then that life is about changes, which forces us to make choices, which then have consequences. And that's life. Look at it carefully. Constant change, always changing, constantly requiring of us or forcing us to, one, make a choice. To forgive, for example. Look at the situation differently. And yes, based on how you look at it differently and the choice you make to move beyond that situation, to get unstuck, will have consequences. Namaste. I'm Shervington Hannes. Shalom. Do take care of yourself. Hotep. Until next time, remember, you can always get more information about the Forgiveness Show and about my work in terms of addictions and substance use, counseling and therapy at my website at changeclinic.org. Bye for now.